Oh, hello YouTube. My name is James PFP. This is the Banjocast. I'm picking it up right from the start this evening. I'm not going to bother with, I'm hoping any of that came through YouTube. Hello YouTube. My name is James PFP. I'll talk slower so that it doesn't mess up the algorithm any. My tea just finished perking. Well, not perking, warming up. It's back here. What's going on tonight on the Banjocast? I hear you ask. Can you hear me from there? I hope so. Well, here it is. Couple of things to comment upon and or otherwise relate before getting back into the lovely grind that is Blender. And the Blender news is actually significant today. Anyone who's been following me the last few days might have noticed I didn't come on the stream today in my regular daily pattern, and the reason was I spent most of the day relaxing because I spent some good quality time after I finished streaming yesterday. Early in the morning, I spent some really good quality time getting ahead of the game, so the next time I would be streaming, a lot of the things would be already done. So I did a lot of planning in advance, which is it's really what I'm trying to say here. I just popped at the chat. Anyone who happens to be watching, you can participate in the stream here by chatting. Chat is my favorite type of participatory experience. I have to admit, I've been a part of many chat rooms in my time. As soon as I had access to a chat room, I found one of my callings in life, which was identifying ideological issues with people on the other end of a teletype machine, like a teletype interface. That really appeals to me. Don't know why. It reduces many problems to their most simple form, which is what's the ideas behind this. What are the ideas and why do people particularly choose these words to try to express them? I've learned a lot by working that way, and I've also learned a lot in return by expressing certain ideas. Again, the YouTube's trying to tell me I shouldn't talk. Don't talk to your stream. Fuck you, YouTube. Fuck you. I'm going to keep saying words like that too. No profanity warnings whatsoever. I'm just going to say what I feel and think. Well, without further ado then. Without further ado. Part of tonight's stream is going to be a very small part, I might add, is going to be rebroadcasting content from someone else on YouTube. And this particular content is Sticks, Hex, and Hammer, who I saw earlier today for the first time live in a chat. Well, I mean, I've seen him while he was streaming live before, but I've never been in a chat room where I was also, like, where Sticks was also chatting. So I threw a few things at him, see what he would respond or not. He can't say that he didn't see me this time. He may not have seen me on many of the comments of his videos in the past, but however, Sticks, if you're listening, or if you happen to come across this particular video, Sticks, I have left you many comments, many comments, some more reflective than others, some more driven by muse, which I couldn't identify better than others, and some that were genuinely raising a comment or criticism to the particular ideological content that you were espousing at that moment in time. However, I don't have a problem with you most of the time. Not even if you're not wearing a shirt. That doesn't bother me. Oh, sorry, my bad here. I've got a mistake made. Look.
Time to plead.
So, all right, everybody.
And the Pope decided to use his Christmas message time to plead for the refugees, for the migrants in Europe. Say, oh, we need to have mercy and help these people who, they can't help themselves. They've been forced out of their homelands. Funnily enough, though, he doesn't call out the Western leaders who started all the problems in the Middle East to begin with and say, hey, it would be easier to help them by, not screwing up their countries in the first place. This has been something that I've said now for several years.
I think many of us
the fundamental underlying disease is proxy warfare and world policing. The migrant crisis itself is nothing more than a symptom. And when people fixate on that, it doesn't matter whether they're like, well, I don't want refugees here, or, throw open the borders, basically. It doesn't really matter what side you're on, because you're fixating on the wrong thing. It's the wrong topic to even discuss. The fact is, there never would have been a wave of, what is it now, 2 million or so Syrians out of Syria, had there not been interventionism in Syria by Western countries funding the FSA, overlooking ISIS, at several points suggesting attacking Bashar al-Assad's forces. If Assad had been able, without any pressure from the outside world, to solve the problem in his own sovereign nation on his own terms, he would have wiped the FSA.
Possibly we would have seen a much different outcome than what we have seen with the Western interventionism and the growth of ISIS, for example, under particular North American regimes of note.
Say off the map, ISIS never would have had, half the country under its control. It wouldn't have metastasized over into Iraq. It therefore would not have had the power necessary to spread elsewhere. By the way, look at Libya. It's another thing. And the problem is this. The Western leaders, at the same time that they say, well, we need to intervene in some foreign country, trust me, it'll make it so much better. We're going to liberate the
impacts directly in what I'll be working on later, in case you haven't noticed it. And when you next see the project I've been working on, you'll get a better idea of what it was I wanted to do with the rest of. I wasn't only putting a bunch of clips of video and audio into position and going to leave it at that with a few numbers. Oh no.
We're going to liberate Syria, and then things fall to shit. Then, at the same time, they say, oh, shit, there are people that have been displaced by evil terrorists, that never would have been there if not for our efforts. So now we need to accept refugees, and I've said this too. The ticking time bomb thing that's spoken of by maybe Trump or some other more nationalistic leader, or populistic leader, I think in his case, that's the result of you just destroyed somebody's country and now you're letting them come and stay at your house for a night. That's not a good idea, because those people will never feel, in most cases, any national loyalty or cultural loyalty. They want to be in their home culture, in their home country. You have denied it to them, and now expect them to play nice and be happy about the situation they're in. You're taking people as well from a really, like, a nice, warm, sunny climate, putting them in some place like Sweden. Oh, they're going to be totally depressed. Their seasonal affective disorders going to be off the charts. Like, if some person native to, like, Northern Europe can suffer, trust me, someone who's used to having, that nice hot desert sun, yeah, they're gonna look askance, I think, to all those cloudy, rainy days up there. Oh, yeah, there's frost falling from the sky. What?
First time I heard, I've listened up to about this far, and I'm going to listen to the rest of the video on the stream here, and I'll be reacting to it when the time comes. But when I first heard this, before he ever pushed a can in my face, when I first heard this that he's talking about, I thought to myself, God damn, I'd already come to some realization. I'd already come to the same realization that if you go to different parts of the world at different times of the year, things which you take for culturally certain will not be true because of the climate around you. I'm not talking climate change. I mean the annual climate around you. If you're in the middle of Europe and you're far enough north or south, you will prefer either Orthodox or Catholic Easter, for example. Depending on where you are, you'll have a different understanding of where Easter falls, simply because not only the cultural background you come from, but what part of the world that cultural background was most concerned with, if it was farther north or south. And therefore, a particular moon and having a moon earlier than another moon would matter when it comes to determining when the spring begin.
Wonderful landscape. I'm on government benefits, there's nothing to do, a lot of these, it's going to end up like
Consequently, I've also become quite comfortable with the idea of helping people that might not be from my particular, not only cultural background, but geographic region. So if they were to come to the type of climate he just described, one that was got darker and darker earlier and earlier than anyone ever expected or had experienced up to that point in time before, or that was much more gray and foreboding and wet and cold than they'd ever. I would be fully capable and willing to help any new constituent of my culture to adapt to that. That's not a difficult thing to learn. It's not a difficult thing to get used to at all. And depending on your situation, it might actually be easy to get used to. Would also be a contention I'd make. It would also be fairly easy to get used to.
Native American reservation situation where a bunch of people end up becoming alcoholic and addicted to drugs, and that'll drive other forms of crime. Meanwhile, all the
that's not all that happens, but that's part of what happens, and it happens in economic situations if you're not North American, Native American as well. What will happen if you have a low enough economic status and you're dependent somehow or another upon some kind of rebalancing socially?
Populace and nativists, they'll conflate that with actual terrorism. Say, look at how evil, never going to assimilate. Well, yeah, no shit. The Western governments are responsible largely for that problem. There never would have been an influx of refugees and migrants.
Never going to assimilate, and he didn't really finish that thought, did he?
If that hadn't happened.
It's not necessarily true.
If Libya and Syria and Iraq had just been allowed to stabilize.
It's not
if
true
we'd never
that's what they ever
involved
wanted either, that they were always that insular that they didn't want to assimilate. It's also the case of the society around them was insular enough that they didn't want them to assimilate. It can go both ways, Sticks.
Involved with Saddam as well. We never would have had like an Al-Qaeda problem. There were refugees from Iraq too. Somalia. Western countries went in and fucked Somalia up years ago.
Yeah.
There's hardly a destabilized location in this world that wasn't destabilized as a result of one of two things. Communism and the Eastern Bloc, or the intervention of the NATO, the Western countries, over the scale of half a century.
Okay.
That's responsible for basically every instance of problems in this world. The grand chessboard began fucking up all the proxy states, in other words. The weaker states got screwed. They got stepped on. Well, we want our dictator's power mad and insane, but he's our dictator, so we're going to install him in power and remove this democratically elected government that leans more towards the other side. You know, this government's getting a little too NATO friendly. We say the Soviets. We're going to march in and we're going to intervene and put a dictator in charge. And they did this all over the place. Look at Pol Pot, things like that. Meanwhile, U.S. and its allies did exactly the same thing. Destabilizing countries on an intergenerational basis. That is, repeated dislodgings of government. We're talking Iran and Iraq and all these things. Like
Sure.
Saddam was a Western pawn originally. Then he said, well, maybe I want to be sovereign. You know, in the wake of the collapse of the USSR, without that boogeyman there present to create a dichotomous, more or less, world. Without that, there was nothing to keep Saddam in check, because he's like, well, now I can work with Russia if I want to. Bye. Whoops, no, you can't. No. You're our pawn. You're our investment. We gave you all sorts of money and weapons and training and tech and everything. No, you have to work with us. No, I'm not working with you. Bye. He says to Uncle Sam, whoops, yeah, Iraq. Oh, Saddam has WMDs. He was involved with 9/11. Woo. And he never was. It's like, who was Osama? Basically a U.S.
So
asset to fight the Soviet Union back in the late 70s and into the 80s. Barely anybody even knows this for some reason. So the Pope is full of shit. If you want to help these people, tell the Western governments to shut the fuck up and stop dislodging people in other countries. You know, we're tired of paying for it. Meanwhile, you're telling us, oh, globalism's so great. No, the globalism's what caused this problem. World policing, intervention, international norms, which are used as an excuse to invade third world nations on a regular basis. I'm tired of seeing, like, Americans have to get attacked by a terrorist group. You know, there's some bombing somewhere. They have to go over and fight in a war in some foreign land, and then their body gets splattered. There's not even hardly a shard of bone to bring home to mom and dad. Now, we have to pay through the nose for the military complex we have to use to do all of these things. We're tired of it. And that's, yeah, it might sound nationalistic. That's funny. We're arguing against war. We're arguing against harming people who are typically part of the non-European world. I don't want to see them screwed over anymore. Let them be stable. If they decide to work with China or Russia more than the U.S., well, then, you know, there's a simple solution. Number one, we could become more economically powerful. You know, that'll require us to reduce taxes, which requires us to, not partake in so much regulation, bureaucracy, and globalistic policing. What a wonderful idea. Or we could be nice to people. We could have good diplomatic relations instead of always screwing people over. It costs a lot less, by the way, to do that. You think those state visits that cost $500,000 or so a minute, you think that's expensive? What about running a bunch of drones over somebody's country? And that's less expensive than idling an aircraft carrier offshore. You know how much it costs to maintain those when they're in active operation, not in a dock somewhere? Oh, you wouldn't even believe it. I don't even want to think about how many average annual salaries it takes to run a single aircraft carrier. I think it's in thousands.
Yeah.
To run it for the year. It's,
and not only
it's
that, but
monumental.
the population of the aircraft carrier itself is not insignificant. How many annual salaries it takes, but what's the population of, say, the Big E? U.S. aircraft carriers in service. This would list, Wikipedia would at least list which ones are currently in service, active service. So decommed, look, they're all decommed pretty much. The Lexington, gee whiz, that was an old one, right? She's a museum ship now. That's Lexington, in Lexington, Texas. I think it's in Lexington. CV-44 canceled before construction began. Iwo Jima probably canceled. Forrestal, Saratoga, geez, those were pretty old. Call it a super carrier of its time, right? All these are Forrestals. Kodiak, Enterprise, supercarrier, lead ship. Let's just have a look at the. She's only just been decommissioned, right? Look at the Big E. Planned 6, completed 1, 5 canceled of the class. Cost $500 million, equivalent to $4 billion. Cost at the time of its design was $500 million. The time that the cancellation occurred was $4 billion to build one. $4 billion. Complement. Do you see the complement number there? Do you see how many people are actively in service on one of those boats? It's fucking incredible. So plus the annual salaries. Speaking of annual salaries.
Some. And yeah, it's useful to be able to defend yourself, but most of what we've been doing for the last, 50 years hasn't been self-defense. There have been only a very limited number of cases in which we've managed to create stability in another country. Because nation building doesn't work. Trump, for all of his half-assery when it comes to foreign policy in some respects, he did bomb like a Syrian air base to try to dick wag and say, well, you deployed
size of a small town, in other words.
Chemical weapons, which he never did. Basically, it was a slap at Obama because Obama said, well, in order to strike anything there, I need congressional permission. Trump's like, no, I don't need permission. Hey, rev up some aircraft, get ready, we're going to fire some missiles over there and see what happens. It was basically an ego trip for him. It was to assert the fact that he wasn't going to be weak and work with others and, back down like Obama did. He wants, America's going to do what it wants. Shut up about it, basically. I opposed that. And that's half-assery, but even he has said, yeah, you can't do the nation-building thing. We're not going to do that like anymore in Afghanistan. It's expensive, it doesn't work. We'll help, but we can't do everything ourselves, and local governments need to work with us. So
I'm just thinking myself there, what does this tell me, this number over here? 2,700 sailors to 150 chiefs, and then there's 150 officers as well. As many chiefs as there are officers, giving you effectively 300 officers. But that's not really the way of looking at it. Anyhow, what's the ratio 150 to 2,700? That's pretty easy to figure out. Divide it by 100 on both sides to begin with. It gives you 27 to 1.5, which is the same as 54 to 3. 3 officers or 3 chiefs handle 54 men. Or 54 personnel, regular sailors or support personnel. The pilots, and that's the reason these officers or chiefs are also going to be splitting the jobs about the pilots and support personnel. Pilots are also officers, but a lower rank, I would say, than some of these officers. Funny.
He hasn't invaded anybody. Good. You know, he put more troops in Afghanistan. Again, I oppose it on an ideological basis, even though I admit it's possible that it actually does bring stability there. I mean, we can't do this forever. The grand chessboard situation has declined. There are people now, the same people that are like, save the refugees. They want to restart the Cold War. You know, that's going to restart another wave of these proxy wars. You do realize that, right? That's what's...
How could it be possible that 3 people could take care of 50 people? You need 3 at least to be able to like, that's on average the breakdown was
going to happen. There will be more. If you think that like Syria and Iraq and all that, it's bad, there will be more of that. Globalism is not the cure to the ailment of warfare. Globalism causes wars. It just shifts the wars from big countries massacring one another to smaller countries being repeatedly destabilized so that hundreds of millions of people who shouldn't have to live in poverty do in places like Libya and Syria, which were beginning to develop. Like, if it weren't for intervention, Libya was almost first world. Syria, by Middle Eastern standards, it was a pretty nice place to live. It had some degree of urban development going on that you don't find in some of its immediate neighbors. It was maybe less in Iraq post-Saddam Hussein. Better than a lot of other countries that wouldn't be considered first world. There was access to infrastructure. There was access to the rudiments of life that people would consider, you know, marginally westernized almost.
He doesn't
Assad's
speak,
no religious zealot. He's an Alawite.
truth.
People don't want to realize that he wears a suit, not a robe, in other words. He's basically a Western-style commercialist, but they don't want to admit that either. I think he's also of European extraction. I think so is his wife. Is his family lineage even from the Syriac region? I'm not even 100% sure it is. I thought he was, wasn't one of his grandparents, like, British or something? I almost think that it was. I could be totally wrong, but I mean, come on. You can't just look at other people and say, well, these third worlders don't deserve basically the ability to self-govern because, you know, a grand chessboard or post-grand chessboard dickwag contest. And then at the same time say, well, you know, help the refugees, help the migrants. No. Now you've screwed them, and now you're screwing people in the West while you're double screwing those same refugees because they don't even want to be here, and you're pretending that that's holy and moral and stuff. No, the Catholic Pope is full of shit. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He knows nothing of foreign policy. He knows nothing of military strategy. He barely knows anything about his own religion, it seems, in some cases. Why would anybody trust what he says? He's not holy. He's not sacred. He's just a perfectly fallible old man who shits on his balls once in a while. He farts, he poops, he gets sick, and he pukes. He gets a little too drunk sometimes, maybe off the altar wine. The normal person, the fact that he puts on a white robe, kisses a cross, doesn't make him special. Right. No, anybody could do that. I can go buy a white robe and say, well, now I'm the Pope. I'm God's representative because of some obscure religion.
I thought first when I saw this, the title here, Catholic Pepe pleads for migrants. But I should put this down there. Yeah, won't you please retitle this video to read Catholic Pepe pleads for migrants instead?
Just canonical thing from 1,000 years ago. Let me kiss this cross. You come and kiss my ring like I'm a mafia leader. It doesn't work that way. That's not spirituality. That's just basically a corporation. He's good at branding. The Catholic Church is a corporation. That's all it is. It's all it'll ever be, too. There's no shred of spiritual fabric, I think, left.
The lizard at the top.
Especially in the Vatican. There's some priests. You know, you talk to a priest, some of them are very religious people.
Vatican priests? Actually, I think there's a lot more cardinals in the Vatican.
Quite intelligent. The Pope, other than being academically trained, really has no advantage over any other randomly selected religious leader. And they're all, you know, everyone understands that every religious leader...
Sticks. I don't know if you know what you're talking about there, dude. Oh my God, Sticks. That's a bit of a generalization. There's internal orders to the Catholic order, and this should really be mentioned. There's internal orders to the Catholic order, to the Catholic whole. So you can have entered one of those sub-orders which are fairly insular at a young age and have been brought up entirely within the politics of that subgroup of Catholicism. That was kind of the problem with Ratzinger the last time. One of their big image issues that they had. Who's the current Pope anyway? I haven't been following any news about the Pope because I could give two fucks about the Pope. Shocking here. I got to look up Wikipedia this way. Who is the Pope, man? Who is the current Pope? The Pope. La Papa. Incumbent. Pope Francis. Right. Pope Francis. Kind of looks like... geez, he kind of looks like a couple... British people I could pick. The Bishop of Rome. There are cardinals, of course. There are bishops. There are priests. There are canons. There are deacons. There are curates. And then there are Jesuits. There are various holy orders other than the Jesuits. There are, Franciscan monks, or I can think of the Christian Brothers, are particularly infamous order, probably not so popular nowadays. Italian, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio, 266th and current Pope. Title he owes ex officio as Bishop of Rome, right? As character of his office, ex officio. He gets it due to the fact of his office. Chose Francis in honor of Assisi, of Francis of Assisi. Francis is the first Jesuit Pope, you see. Oh, look at that. Francis is the first Jesuit Pope. My God, the first from the Americas, first from the Southern Hemisphere, and the first Pope from outside Europe since Gregory. Good. Oh my God, Sticks. Is the first Jesuit Pope. How about that? That was a wild guess. Just so happens he's a Jesuit. Just so happens.
Leader other than the ones from their religion is false. They realize that they're all dumb. They don't know what they're talking about, and their spirituality is basically bereaved of any reason. But then they look at their own weird tribal totemic symbolic bullshit, and they say, well, mine is so much better. Mine is so holy. No, it's not holy. It's bullshit. Organized religion is literal bullshit. There's no spirituality in it. You want to know true spirituality, you're going to have to find it yourself. You're not going to get it from the Pope.
La Popa. La Papa.
No, you're not. That's about all. Peace out.
Strangely, Sticks takes a hands-off approach. When he was a Satanist, he was a Satanist. I didn't follow him back then, but I've gone back over his videos, and I've paid a bit of attention to the various stances he's taken over time and the way that he argued in or out of them. Sometimes argued in and out of them. One thing that he says more recently about Satanism in particular is that it is a property which is controlled ultimately by the Catholic Church. It makes perfect sense to me that they control both the supposed light and dark sides of the people that are interested in controlling. Even if they'll only be their own selves. If you're interested in being your own individual conscious agency, then you might as well assume control and maintain that control. That's all that Sticks usually argues for. The first Jesuit Pope, first in the Americas, the first from the Southern Hemisphere, and the first Pope from outside Europe since the Syrian Gregory III in the 8th century. prior to the first big schism, in other words. You could also argue that there was a schism prior to that, prior to the one at around 1000 AD, shortly after 1000. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look where the Orthodox Church comes from. Church v. Catholic, and then again Orthodox, Easter v. the rest of Christendom, v. Catholic, or Protestant for that matter. Protestants tend to follow the Catholic pattern for Easter anyhow. Protestants sometimes share the Catholic diary of the saints as well, but the Orthodox have been categorizing their saint days, their holy days throughout the year. They've been categorizing them since around about 1000 AD differently. So sometimes they don't overlap, and sometimes they do. The older associations are the ones that overlap. The ones that have been labeled or been put down since don't. It's very, very cool. He's almost progressive, yeah. I don't see the Pope tearing in the Vatican walls now. What kind of meat does the Pope eat? Ask the question, see whether or not it gets any responses. Oh, very funny, Jim. Hey, we got somebody watching? Somebody watching now? Yeah, average view, not very long. Don't think there's anybody watching right now. That's okay, see? Hey, here's the next thing. I unboxed something last night after the stream was over. This is Blender 2.79. They actually updated the version, proper updated it, and this looks to be 9th of November maybe. It could have been the 11th of September. I don't think it was September 11th. Anyhow, the new version has made some significant changes to the way it does stuff. Not in what I'm already doing below, but in the particularly in what I'm doing here when I render. So right now I have it obviously doesn't show me what I want to render it in. I haven't, since I updated it, I had saved this in an older version, and this information from the older version, which is no longer how to put it, it's no longer compatible. The information that was telling it how to render the final project, because I hadn't rendered one yet. It's blank. It's waiting to be entered. But this is what's new with 2.79 in particular. I have many of the same choices, all of the same still image choices, and a bunch of new, well, a bunch here. Like I said, this is all still images, including OpenEXR. I can render to that format: TIFF, Targa, JPEG, PNG, bitmap, whatever. The movies have been reduced to 3 types: AVI JPEG with JPEG compression, AVI with RAW video compression. Those are big AVIs, as big as the bitrate will allow. You have to recompile them later, recompress them. Frame server, output the image to a frame server somewhere that's waiting, somewhere that would be waiting for the frame to show up, in other words. Or FFmpeg video, which is what most every video I've ever made has been rendered to. So now there's a lot less choices to get the FFmpeg, and I've got presets for the types that I might want to output to. H64 Matroska for scrubbing. Oh. Or just in Matroska or MP4 or whatever. Oh, that's so tempting. I'd like to try that out. See how that works. Perceptually lossless. I could choose a bunch of different output qualities. They're all given names now, so you have an idea what you're getting. Perceptually lossless. Encoding speed is the how much processor time the render is allowed. If I go faster, I get the biggest file. If I go slower, I get the smallest file. Faster is sometimes very tempting, but I get a bigger file. I'll go fast this time. Keyframe interval. I'm going to set it for YouTube purposes, 15. Max B frames. I haven't looked that up in a while, but that may still be something that YouTube talks about explicitly. I haven't checked in a while. Let me see. Max B frames, that's on YouTube. In fact, it's particularly in here. If I go in my Creator Studio, actually I don't need to go here at all. I could go to a page and ask the question on Google itself. What would be the set of the words? So it's settings, video settings. It's also like all right. It's uploader guide, I think. Recommended upload encoding settings. Video codec with this being true, which is H.264, the frame rate. Look at this, the audio codec. 96 kilohertz or 48 kilohertz. I think I'm doing it in 48 right now, which is essentially mono. Although all the stuff I'm inputting to it is stereo recording, so I can turn the camera back on. 2 consecutive B frames and close gap of half the frame rate. Two consecutive B frames. Don't need to minimize this window, but I do want to make Blender pop to the front again. Hey, hang on a second. Max B frame. Set a maximum number. 2. I think that's how I read that. So it will lay down one B frame and only ever one more B frame before it moves to the next keyframe. This is a way to look at how much extra data is going to... I don't know if you've ever seen H.264 video where it's been perhaps passed around a little bit. So some of the bits have been switched one way or the other just because they've been transmitted. There's a few encryption errors from time to time. Anyhow, end result is sometimes the image will turn, like the background of the image will all turn gray at once. It's not enough B frames. to correct the fact that sometimes these few bits one way or the other will go out, and the end result is a cascading change which changes a bunch of different bits for a while. Hey, what have I done differently since the last time I looked at this? I spent some time marking up what I think I know I'm going to want to say or do differently on the screen. For example, this scene here, I have these two individuals, this first identified part. These two individuals will start talking to one another, and the area where they will be talking to one another, I've got marked with that yellow bar. I don't necessarily want to use this color or anything about this strip at all. I don't want to necessarily use that in the video information in the final project, but I am using it as a placeholder, just to mark the fact that there's something that has to be added there to allow for it.